Thanks a lot, Lawrence. Any other points, responses? We'll take another round of questions. We've got Ricardo over here first, and there's a lot over here, actually. Ricardo first.
Yes, Ricardo Wawi, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. We all heard from the reports about the positive factors, and among them we talked about good governance. The problem is that good governance is a rare event. How do we work when there's no good governance, and how do we in a way provide the basis for action under those conditions? Because it's easy when there's good governance. When you have a president like Lula who gets selected on saying, I want no child to have less than 3 meals a day, or Evo Morales that says malnutrition zero, it will be the goal of my government. That's easy. When you have none of that, how do you do it? How do we empower people around the world to demand? Because it's easy to say, let's demand, but if you get shot at being demand, or you get put in prison, it's not an easy task. So how do we build this international coalition to empower people to actually have that as a right, not just statement or have a technical advice or a report behind them?
Thank you. The lady in the front row, please. You can pass the mic.
Thank you. I'm Beena Agarwal, Institute of Economic Growth in Delhi. I just want to complicate the gender question because it seems to me that we're talking about women, and of course we all agree that women need more resources, they need more information, more access to credit, technology, land, and they are the major farmers. There's no disagreement on that. But I don't see why the responsibility for improving nutrition and health should fall on women. I mean, it relates to, for instance, Mira's comment that, oh, if women go out to work, well, won't their child nutrition suffer? Firstly, I don't think that's necessarily the case. There are men who do take care of kids. But I think if issues of training, of capacity building are being talked about, if we're talking about maternal health, if we're talking about what sort of food should be cooked, all of those questions have to be addressed to both men and women. And I think that's where the gender issue arises. It can't just be women. Just one more point I do want to make, because it hasn't, so far I haven't heard it at all. And it is a link, which is that food has to be cooked. And there is a very important link with the kind of fuel that is used. We know there's huge health implications of unprocessed biofuels, which is the predominant form of fuel, which is used in Africa and in Asia, and South Asia in particular. We also know that some of the studies that have come out, there's a huge body of research now which shows that women's risk of mortality is very much higher than men's risk because of smoky kitchens. Very large number of deaths, there's very high infant mortality from acute respiratory infections linked with smoky kitchens and so on. So I know that this conference is not necessarily addressing that, but there is that aspect of how do we cook the food, by what fuel, and so on.
Thank you very much. I'll take, there's Amita in the center over there, and then Robert over here. So first over. Put your hand up, Amita. Yeah.
Here, guess you can hold it. This is only a very small question regarding someone made a statement about the fact that probably about 60% of the people, and I think if we take out the developed countries, can meet the expenses for nutrition requirement. I just thought I would like that to be treated with little caution. If I quickly do a calculation about India, I think that upfront 37% of India's population can't even take care of their calorie requirement. And then we know there are huge amount of other population which can't buy that. Now it's a question of you have enough income, but that income actually is faced with very frequent shocks, and most important is the health shock. There are a large number of studies which have come up saying that one single health shock in a family just reduces, puts a huge amount of drain on the consumption expenditure, and the first victim becomes the food and nutrition related expenditure. And the others, of course, some natural disasters, drought, floods, etc. So unless we also do something about it simultaneously, just going by the size of the income that somebody, a household has at one's disposal, is nowhere closer to answering or getting handled to a question whether people have enough income resources to buy. And my gut feeling strongly says that larger, about 60% of people in most developing countries probably do not have that, because there are competing requirements, and some of them are related to severe shocks.
Thank you for that comment. I'll hand over to Robert.
Yes, Robert Boss, WHO. 2 points, one on intersectorality and the other on monitoring. I fully agree with Mira that in reality of the past 30 years we've seen that intersectorality is very hard to achieve. Whether we don't have evidence because it really doesn't work or because there has been a lack of funding for this is an open question. But the issue, of course, is that if we don't go for intersectorality, particularly at the planning phase of development, agriculture development, we will never be able to take advantage of the opportunities that exist at the early planning stages. So it is important to make sure that agricultural development through a mechanism of health impact assessment, which was mentioned this morning, looks at the opportunities that exist and reduces the risks. And that is where other sectors, agriculture, environment, have to come in and contribute to reducing the health risks and taking these health opportunities. Now, one thing is that we don't want to give money for intersectoral action. The other is that there's also very little money for monitoring. And so, you know, since I'm in my position in WHO responsible for the joint monitoring program on water supply and sanitation, we've been struggling with this a lot. And we've been trying to change the marketing of monitoring as an activity. Actually, the idea comes from the person who's sitting in front of me here, because he's a member of our strategic advisory group, and they came up with the idea to market monitoring as a global common good rather than just an activity, and that for any of the water supply and sanitation activities that donors give money for, they should set aside a small percentage that goes to global monitoring activities. And I think that same story could also be sold for the nutrition and health aspects of agricultural development.
Thank you, Robert. I'm going to take two more. I see a lot of hands here. Maybe I'm just looking in that direction. Oh, no, there was some. There was a we'll take yourself, sir, and then we're going to move to the person behind Robert over here.
My name is Alam from the Millennium Village Project in Ethiopia. I was just wondering about the take-home message we're getting about the IFI relationship of agriculture and nutrition. In a country where over 80% or 90% is agrarian, for me, there is no other way of improving nutrition than focusing on agriculture. So I'm just wondering what kind of message we're giving. The fact that we could not demonstrate on impact studies or on that agriculture is strongly related with nutrition does not mean that the link is not there. So it is important that the message has to be that in some areas like globally, yes, we have a lot of food, we have a lot of crop production, but there are many countries in sub-Saharan African countries which need to focus on improving production, on doubling, tripling, quadrupling production to meet just minimum food requirement in their country. So it's just a message that I want to share.
Thank you very much. Then the last comment or question over here on this side, and then we're going to have to wrap up with the response.
Well, my question is directed to Mira. In most of the developing countries, I'm Professor L.A. Singh from Magadha University, both guys, sir. My question is directed to Meera. Unless and until we create adequate capacity building and infrastructure of administrative arrangement in most of the developing countries, I don't think that we will succeed in networking with the nutrition, agriculture, and health. So this is one very basic idea lacking in India and elsewhere in most of the developing countries. And the second point is that apart from this, you must have a system of good governance. Unless and until we have transparent rules, accountability, and transparent regulation of all the funding agencies that come in under the purview of the NGOs in most of the developing countries, including India, we cannot have, you see, a social networking or a networking with the government agencies or international agencies worthwhile. So my worry is that capacity building, governance, and international intervention, and side by side the effective intervention of the, you see, local population, particularly the citizenry, must form a part and parcel of an integrated scheme of effective intervention. If you feel like that, I would like to be shared my views very adequately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, there were some important comments there. We have one or two questions. I would like to ask the panel if they'd like to respond. And there was the first question about what do we do in a situation of where there is not good governance, where the governance is problematic in terms of action.
I think we need to go back to the opening yesterday and what the Prime Minister of India expressed. You know, access to affordable, nutritious food is a human right. And if we start there, I think that's our point of departure for a conference like this. I think the elephant in the room is the government. We can never replace government. And what we've got to do is link the laboratory and the streets together, because that leadership from the top and pressure from the bottom is what brings change. That's our own experience. And I think that one of the big challenges government faces, and which we've got to help in, is how do we build the capacity of government to do the right thing? Because those are systemic management issues, which we have a huge amount of capacity to build around. And so it's useless creating another huge, big system when it's just going to be another leaking pot. And, you know, there are people on the fringes, the blood-sucking parasites that really gain from the money that is put in from public funds. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is incentivizing the private sector. I had a meeting yesterday with the roller mill flour producers. And it was amazing. They were the ones raising with government why we need to fortify flour. And quoting the statistics about the 80% of children under 5 and women that are anemic, or 30,000 babies that suffer neural birth defects, and felt they, from a private sector point of view, felt this was an indictment on them as well. So how do we create a shared vision? Because in every sector you will find people who do want to do the right thing. And I think for us, it's what's the coalition that we build across the parts of the value chain, because no one partner can do everything. And that coalition ends up in what Meera is terming and what we've been trying to advocate, a movement that becomes an unstoppable force for good and the public good.
Lawrence,
very quickly, and then I'll shut up, Stuart. Governance. Governance isn't only about governments. Value chains, the way they're governed, the way they're set up. Village councils, the way they're set up. The way the CGIAR and National Research Institutes prioritize different technologies and research issues. Those are all part of the governance agenda. So it's something that I think we've neglected a lot in agriculture and food. The take-home message on nutrition and agriculture, and I'll stop, Stuart. My take-home message on agriculture and nutrition is if we don't pay more attention to impact evaluations at the intervention level, we run the risk of losing funding from donors, because donors are very sensitive to what the citizens in their countries are telling them about the value of aid. But more importantly, we lose the ability to learn about what works and what doesn't work at anything other than a very aggregate level. Yes, of course, I believe agricultural growth reduces malnutrition. I've contributed to some of those regression analyses that show that. But that's a very blunt instrument for trying to figure out how these massive agricultural resource flows can have an even bigger impact. And I believe that we've got a fundamental obligation to find out how we can do more with the resources that we convene.
Did you want to say something? Just quickly.
Yeah. Okay, on the issue of just because we can't demonstrate impact doesn't mean the linkages don't exist. I agree with that statement completely. We can't demonstrate impact because there are multiple reasons. One, because, as Lauren said, there are methodological issues with the evaluations. Two, because the evaluations weren't done in the first place. And third, perhaps the most important one, is that those projects were never designed to have an impact on nutrition. What is the point of doing an evaluation if it was never designed to have an impact on nutrition? So yes, but I'm talking about the larger universe. In the larger universe, you want to do impact evaluation only after first you have consciously designed projects to have a nutrition outcome, and then go ahead and do the evaluations. On the governance and capacity building, several people have raised that question, and I think this whole idea of multisectorality is coming back in fashion again. It's great that it's coming back in fashion, but we really need to think very hard what are the best implementation mechanisms. And I remind everybody about the earlier mantra I had shared. Think multisectorally, act sectorally. You cannot expect the Ministry of Agriculture to understand why we need to deworm kids. That's not their business. That's not what they're accountable for. That's not what they get resources for. So we might want to think about some ways of acting sectorally, but then bringing some of these things together in terms of accountability and reporting. And that's why I again reiterate that those of you who are interested might want to look at the Senegal example very, very carefully, how they pull these things together. Okay, last comment on catastrophic issues somebody had raised over there. Absolutely, you need to address those issues, but there are different tools to address catastrophic shocks, social safety nets being one of those. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mira. We're out of time. This conversation obviously will continue throughout the conference. I'm not going to try and really sum up. Just to say that this whole discussion in many ways can be framed in terms of challenges and opportunities. What's important is that we have at least as many opportunities as we have challenges, and we're in a situation, the very fact that we have 1,000 people registered for this conference shows the awareness of the failure of the silo mentality and the importance of looking at ways of capturing synergies and demonstrating synergies, which relates to the ways we measure indicators, impact studies. What does it really mean to talk about nutrition-sensitive agriculture, for example? And Jay has talked all about the networks, partnerships, and new movements, the grassroots movements, the alliances and delivery models that are needed in this new era that we're moving into of capturing synergies and working together more systematically, trying to grapple with this whole issue of multi-sectorality. So I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there, but obviously we're going to carry on talking about it, but thank you.
May we call upon the next panel to join us?